So welcome everyone. And we are here as part of the Ecovillage at Ithaca lunch break. This is our monthly online Q&A. We hold these on the first Wednesday of the month, although we will be taking a summer hiatus. So this is the last session for a couple of months. We'll start up again in September. My name is Caitlin Cameron, and I'm the project director for Thrive, which is the education and outreach arm for Ecovillage at Ithaca. So I help with tours and educational programs and sharing, the stories coming out of Ecovillage in terms of what we do here. But my guests today are Willo Johnson-DiMarco, who's an Ecovillage resident of Tree. And then also we have Rob Goldberg, who's an Ecovillage resident also in Tree. And they're going to be presenting for 20 or 30 minutes about governance, and especially dynamic governance and sociocracy, and how that's been used and put forward as our form of governance for the Tree neighborhood. And then after that presentation, it will be open for Q&A. Questions of all kinds are welcome. And the three of us will answer questions as best we can, or direct you if we don't know the answer. Just a bit about myself. So I'm fairly recent to Ecovillage. I came in September, so about 9 months. And I had previously lived in Ithaca as a student, and that's how I became aware of Ecovillage at Ithaca. And so I can share perspectives, especially on being a new person, a new resident. I've been a renter as well as a shareholder. I'm a single person without children. I choose to live without a car. And I work remotely. So these are some of the perspectives that I can add and answer questions about. But I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Willo and Rob to introduce themselves and talk a little bit about governance. And remember just to keep adding your name and location in the chat to introduce yourself if you haven't done so already. So yeah, Willo and Rob, take it away.
Rob, you want to go first?
Sure. I'm Rob Goldberg. I'm one of the founders of Tree. I joined what was a joint venture in 2008 when we were just talking about setting it up, and we hired an architect and we started building in 2012 and finished our last building in 2015. So I've been around a while. I was very involved in the development and implementation of dynamic governance, so I can talk more from that. I'm going to talk more about that perspective. And I live in Tree. I decided to come to Ecovillage because when I retired, I was living in a semi-rural area and wanted to live in a more of a community. And I was looking at Ithaca, then heard about Ecovillage, and we've been interested in co-housing. Both my wife and I have been interested in co-housing for many years, so we started going to meetings and got hooked. So here we are. Willo.
Thanks, Rob. I'm Willo. I first got introduced to Ecovillage at Ithaca in the late 90s, and I wanted to live here then. But it took me quite a long time, 30 years, to get to Ecovillage, and ended up in the Tree neighborhood as a shareholder. And I moved in a year ago in April, and my feet were put to the fire pretty quickly when I was asked to be the secretary on the coordinating circle, which you will learn the coordinating circle basically is the parent to all the other circles in the neighborhood. And so that was my first introduction to Tree. And I invited Rob to join me in on this discussion because he has really the founding information and inspiration, and I have the perspective of someone who's been thrown into this and who has seen it work very well, very efficiently, and I've been pretty amazed at how functional it's been. So that's my story. And I'm in South Carolina right now, and I'm expanding my horizons at this point. And I'm good.
Yeah, thank you. Would you like to dive into your presentation?
Sure.
And we do ask everyone else to mute yourselves for this portion. And then when we get to the Q&A, we'll open it back up. So Willow, do you want the slides right away?
Yes, please.
Okay.
So I thought I'd give you some background information, some historical information about Sociocracy, and a general overview of its organization. And the majority of the information in these slides came from, next slide, please. Came from Sociocracy for All, which is an organization that was developed by Ted Rao and Jerry Koch Gonzalez. And they live in the Cherry Hill Ecovillage. I think is it in Massachusetts, Caitlin? I can't remember where it is.
I actually don't know for sure.
It's in Amherst, Massachusetts.
Yeah, it's in Massachusetts.
And it was previously known as Pioneer Valley, but they changed their name last year to Cherry Hill.
So they developed this organization. They have a very informative website that I suggest if you have any interest in Sociocracy to check out. And they have 2 books, and most of the images you're going to see were taken from Many Voices, One Song. And then at the end of the presentation is a couple of slides from someone in our village who put together a specific slide presentation on Sociocracy specific to tree. Next slide, please. So the question is, what is Sociocracy and why? Why would we want a systematic system of self-governance? And the reason is in TREE, and by the way, TREE stands for Third Residential Ecovillage Experience. Pretty sure that's what it stands for.
Yes.
So third neighborhood in a village of 100 units. So TREE has 40 units. And if let's say there's 2 people per household, that would be 80 individual voices, 80 individual opinions, 80 individual points of view and perspectives. And that's a lot of people involved in making decisions. And so what Sociocracy does for us is it helps us to manage decision-making, policy-making, into smaller groups that function in a pretty well-designed flow, a pretty well-designed system that really determines what needs to be done to actually get the work done in a timely fashion. So some of the information that I got about Sociocracy was that the term sociocracy was put forth by a French philosopher in the 1850s. And it's related to sociology, which is the science of how people organize into social systems. And then in the 1940s, the Quaker school developed the actual process of sociocracy in the Netherlands. And that's what we're using today, basically their system with some modifications. And co-housing and eco-villages were the first early adopters of sociocracy in our country and in Europe. Next slide, please. So with sociocracy, we seek unity versus division. In a democratic process, majority rules. In a consensus process, you basically have to get everybody on board to move forward. And in a neighborhood of 80, potentially 80 voices, that could be very difficult. So sociocracy works to shave away at the core of where everyone can agree and then build from there. It uses consent for the decision-making process. And it gets to the best solutions for the entire entity. And it's aligning with the values and the missions of the entire entity. And so you're always asking the question, is this best going to serve our organization? It may not necessarily serve every particular person in the best way, but you're looking to always serve the mission of the organization. And it's I can't say this word, semi-autonomous, yet it works in a dependent way, because every circle, we're going to talk about circles, every circle reports back to the main circle. So there's transparency in the process. Next slide, please. So, sociocracy is based on a number of principles that everyone agrees with and agrees to. And you can see the list of the principles here. I'm just going to highlight a few of them. First of all, everyone's needs matter and everyone gets a voice. However, not everyone gets to vote or decide on policies or the types of things that need to be done. So the decisions are made by few in small groups, but the input is from many. And intentionality is a very important focus of sociocracy. And what that means is that it's not that we question everybody's intention, but we trust that everybody's intention is for the greater good of the entity. And of course, for each other. You know, in intentional community, we look out for each other. And so that's a really important aspect of sociocracy. So again, we're looking to hear from everyone, and we invite people to express their opinions and express whether or not they have objections, because tensions point to a lack of clarity. And so if people are objecting to something that's being proposed, then it just tells us that maybe we're not on the mark. Next slide, please. So all of decisions and all policies are made based on a system of consent. Now, consent sounds a lot like consensus, and there are some forms of self-governance that use consensus. Our other two neighborhoods in Ecovillage, Frog and Song, governed by consensus. And with consensus is a bit less defined, and consensus relies on agreement by the whole organization or the whole entity to be able to move forward. And when working with consensus, at times, if there is one person who's not happy and maybe will never be fully happy, they can stall a decision indefinitely. And so consent works a bit differently. In consent, we give authority to small groups, and we balance the needs of the group and the whole entity based on the needs of an individual. The accountability is to the whole group and the whole entity. But no one's voice is ignored. And we work within what is called zones of tolerance to find solutions that no one objects to. And as I mentioned before, it's possible that someone may not be fully comfortable with a decision that is made, but we may agree to go forward for, let's say, a trial period. Okay, next slide, please. And so we work within what is called the range of tolerance. So someone may have a preference to, they may want to see, let's say, to give an example, they may want to see all of the grass mowed to maybe 2 inches high, but the rest of the group prefers to have the grass mowed to 4 inches. And maybe we can all agree that our range of tolerance is to mow the grass to 3 inches. And so what we do is we kind of whittle away at a particular proposal or presentation until we can get to that range of tolerance. And we say, okay, this is good enough for now. We'll accept this, and it's safe for us to try it. So we'll give it a trial period, maybe a month, 3 months, 6 months, and then we'll revisit it. Next slide, please. So what's most important about sociocracy is the process. It's not it's not necessarily a set of rules or a particular way that you manage the groups or you manage your meetings, but what's most important is the process that is used to get to consent, to get to the consent that is driven by the principles of sociocracy and driven by the mission of the entity, by the way, guided by simple rules and implemented using specific tools. So now I'm going to go into what those tools are. Next slide. So the main tools of sociocracy is circles, and more circles and more circles. We have a lot of circles in tree. And this is where the work gets done. And the kind of work we're talking about is making and setting policies, making decisions on what kind of work needs to be done, and also nominating people in roles and nominating people, let's say, to serve on the board in our neighborhood. Next slide, please. So some of the simple rules of sociocracy is that each circle has a specific domain, which is its authority. It has aims. The aims or the goals are how we carry out the specific authority. The circles are small, between 5 and 7 members, and roles are filled by the members. So you can have some people filling roles, or they're just part of the circle and they're involved in making decisions. So some of the roles that we have in the circles are a leader, a facilitator, a secretary, a delegate, and there may be operational roles if a specific circle is involved in doing, let's say, work that needs to get done, physical work. It sets its own policies and determines what work needs to be done. There are parent circles and child circles. I'll go in a little more detail on what that means. And these circles are linked, and the circles are double linked, which is extremely important, because double linking your circles allows you to have a lot of transparency. It's decentralizing the power, and that really is the crux of sociocracy, is that you don't have one person making all the decisions and really co-opting how things get done and how decisions are made.
Yeah,
And
I just wanted to add one thing.
Go ahead.
That one of the important things in circles is membership. If someone wants to be a member of a circle, they have to make a commitment to regularly attend meetings and actually follow through on that commitment, or else they could be taken out of a circle. The purpose of that is that when we make decisions and share information, it involves people learning about the background and information, and people just drop in occasionally for a decision. They don't understand the issues fully. So we try to make sure the people who are in circles are actually participating. And one of the problems with consensus is that we had people dropping in and just all of a sudden objecting to something they didn't understand. And so that's one of the reasons. Anyway, I'll go back, but anyway, so the important thing is circle membership is a real commitment. I'm sorry.
And so lastly, the feedback and information flow within and between the circles is critical, so that all members of the entity have access to all of the information and all of the decisions that have been made. All right, next slide, please. So the type of circles that you can have in this form of governance is basically 4 different types. You have a mission circle, and we're going to talk about how we really don't have a mission circle, but we do have a board of directors. So a mission circle carries out the long-term planning and makes sure that the entity or organization stays true to its mission. The general circle, which in tree is called the, oh God, I can't remember what it's called already. I'm losing it here.
Coordinating circle.
Of course, it's a coordinating circle. I was a secretary on the coordinating circle. So our general circle, called the coordinating circle, connects all departments, and it actually initially passes on the authority to each of the department circles. And the department circles are really the workforces. They are the parent circles of all of the other sub-circles. They get all of the policies done and all of the policies basically written and consented on, and all of the work done for the entity. And then the sub-circles are divided off from the parent circles, and they acquire specific domains from the parent circles, and they focus the aims and get the work done to carry those that authority out. Next slide, please. So on the left-hand side, you see a parent circle and the 2 subcircles, and you see that they're interlocked. And we're going to talk about the function of the leader and the delegate and how they form the double link between the parent and the child circles, the subcircles. And it is the parent circle that has the broad authority, and the subcircles carry out the more specific domains. So the broad authority or the broad domain of a parent circle could be, for example, taking care of the buildings and the grounds, and that can include setting policy, taking care of all the maintenance of the buildings, taking care of maintenance of the grounds. And so that would be the example of a parent circle, and a subcircle might be the mowing subcircle, and they take care of, mowing all the grass. Next slide. So on the upper left-hand side, what you see there is a parent circle and a subcircle. And the double link comes from the leader and the delegate. These are 2 different roles, and they're usually 2 different people. So you wouldn't have a leader and a delegate being the same person, although some roles can be taken on, more than one role can be taken on by a person. And so the leader of the circle, their function really is to bring information from the parent circle on the kinds of tasks that need to be done by the subcircle, and the leader will determine what is going to be brought to the meetings, and the delegate reports up to the parent circle. So let's say a subcircle has a meeting, and in the meeting they're going to set some kind of policy, and it is the delegate that will report to the parent circle the intricate details of the policy. So that's how that will work. Now, if you look on the right-hand side, you will see this is an example of a parent circle. So for tree, in the center would be our coordinating circle, and then the work circles around it. And then you've got the subcircles for each of the work circles. There is a flow through each of the circles back to the main circle, or the general circle being the coordinating circle. So the information flows freely through, and there's transparency. Let's go ahead to the next slide, please. So this would be an example of the circle organization. And all these pictures are taken from Many Voices, One Song, an excellent resource. I would suggest picking up a copy of that from SOFA's website. Next slide, please. And what I've done here is I've put together, oh, you're gonna have to click again there. There we go. This is an example of the hierarchy of the tree circles, the parent circles, the general circle in the center there, and then the subcircles around them. So PALS, neighborhood life, admin, buildings and grounds, these are the main work circles. And then some of the subcircles, we have a lot more subcircles than this. I just threw in here a few, 2 for each. So for example, the admin circle has the tree fund subcircle and the finance subcircle. And Rob's going to talk a little bit more about the organization specifically to tree. Next slide, please. So how is the work done? Well, we have meetings, lots of meetings and more meetings. But we are very efficient at these meetings. And one of the reasons is because we use SOFA's, that's Sociocracy for All, their guidelines on how to get through meetings and how to be efficient at them. So if you take a look on the left-hand side here, this is a meeting template. And what's different in Sociocracy is that we have opening and closing rounds where we do check-ins. And so even though we are an entity, we are the tree neighborhood, we are the shareholders and renters in tree, we're also human beings. And so the first thing that we do in a meeting is we touch in on our humanity and we check in with each other. And we ask each other how we're doing. And sometimes we share some stuff. good stuff, not so good stuff, but this is a really important part of our meeting, and we all enjoy this. And then the next part of the meeting is to get down to the work, and that's really where the agenda is. And there are three different kinds of meetings, and I have the next slide on it, and I won't talk about it just yet. We'll get to the slide, but there's different things that need to take place in a meeting. Like, for example, you might be setting a new policy, and so you would design your meeting around dealing with the policy and gaining understanding about what's going into the policy, going through an exploration process with the policy, giving a lot of feedback, and then making the decision and coming to consent on that decision. So what is really powerful about our meetings is the process of going through rounds. And I would say that rounds are, I think, is the most important process in sociocracy, because rounds gives us all a voice. So even though our circles are small groups, everyone does get an opportunity, even if they're not a member of a circle, to come in and give an opinion. So there's really three different rounds that we use. We can use a clarifying question round. So we're looking on the right-hand side of the slide. So you may go through hearing from everyone if they have a question on, let's say, a new policy that's being brought forth, and they're not quite certain they understand it. So we'll go through a clarifying round. We may have a reaction round when they give opinions and feedback. And then if a decision has to be made, we go through a consent round to see if we can reach consent or if anyone has objections. And so looking back to the left-hand side of the slide, depending on the number of agenda items you have will depend on how much time you're going to spend in the content area. And the timing is actually pretty tight. So in our meeting templates, we put in the amount of time that we're going to put for each agenda item. And we're really good at sticking to those time frames. So very often we get our meetings done on time. Rob.
Just want to add one. Just let people know, objections are, the objection round is very important, and objections are considered information that helps us make a better decision. They're not, in other words, someone's objection has to be based on what's good for tree and the aims of the group. And it often leads, so it's information that leads to a better decision. It's, that's how we've been taught to think about it in sociocracy.
Yeah, good point, Rob. And as a matter of fact, valid objections are extremely important. And it's really up to the group to determine whether or not an objection is valid. And once again, going back to the mission of the entity, of the organization, of Tree, is this objection really someone's opinion that really is not based on anything that's going to affect the neighborhood or affect the group negatively? Is it someone just having a bad mood, in a bad mood and having a bad day and wants to complain? And so I want to make a point about sociocracy. It's not going to automatically work for you. There has to be a couple of things that the entity brings to the equation. And those things are, first of all, a willingness to compromise, a willingness to work hard on the common goals, and a willingness to trust each other. And without those three things, even though sociocracy is brilliant and is a process that works well, you really have to have a group of people that is willing to put trust in each other. Next slide, please. So this is going to be my last slide, and this is the flow chart of how sociocracy works. And every entity really can design it the way that they see fit. Tree has made a lot of changes to what SOFA recommends. And so if you take a look at the upper left-hand side here, depending on the agenda item in a meeting, will depend on how far you go in this process. So for example, a delegate may report to a parent circle and a policy has already been set, and you may just have a single round for clarifying information. So that would be the understand part on the left-hand side. That's the understand part of that particular agenda item. And so you would go through a clarifying round, and then that's it. You're not making a decision. No one is giving feedback. Or you may actually be looking for feedback, so you open it up into exploration. Now, this particular example is for a policy meeting or a policy setting agenda item, in which case you would actually go all the way to the right-hand side and come to a decision and attempt to reach consent. And so how you set the agenda determines what type of meeting you have. So you can have a meeting that's just basically based on setting policy, or maybe going through a nomination and selection process, or you can just have an operational meeting where you're going to decide what kind of tasks need to be done, what kind of work needs to be done, what kind of projects need to be done. Or you can have a meeting that has all three of those things involved. That's where your facilitator comes in. The facilitator will work with the leader of the circle and determine the agenda items, how much time to devote to each of the agenda items, what order to put them in, and whether or not we have time to bring in other things. So that's basically the general background information for how sociocracy works. I'm going to hand it over to Rob now.
Okay. Well, can we go back a couple of slides to the structure of the groups and tree first? Okay. So I just want to briefly say, give you a little bit of history that, in development of tree, we use a consensus process. And we noted that it did seem inefficient, and we had some problems with people dropping in and objecting to things at the last moment. And we also saw how it was working in other neighborhoods. And we happened to have one of the founding members had a son who was living in Pioneer Valley that had adopted sociocracy. And we got interested in that and had Jerry Koch-Gonzalez come and do a workshop in November of 2015. And a group of us got together, took a course in facilitation of sociocratic meetings, and a group of us developed a proposal to implement sociocracy in Tree, which started in June of 2016. We did an initial proposal and approved it by, went through it in our meetings, our general meetings, approved by consensus for an 18-month trial. The important thing to understand is when you implement anything in sociocracy, you put a time frame on any policy, and including the implementation of sociocracy. So there was an 18-month initial trial. There were clear criteria developed to evaluate the success of sociocracy at the end of, towards the end of the 18 months. We have actually a sociologist in our community who developed a whole evaluation procedure using questionnaires and meetings and all that. And we evaluated it, and we extended it for another couple of years. And now we're on the third extension in 21 to 24. So, and again, we can send you, I suggest we might want to send out that latest proposal because it has our evaluation criteria and it has a complete description of sociocracy in Tree, as we agreed, our agreement of sociocracy. So anyway, that's the thing. Now on the circles, at the time, Jerry Koch-Gonzalez had just implemented sociocracy at Pioneer Valley in 2013. He was working with us in 2015. At that point, he was calling it dynamic governance, but it was related to sociocracy. I won't. It was developed. It was a refinement of sociocracy that we're now just calling sociocracy. In any case, these are our major. We had 4 major circles. that report to the coordinating circle. The tree circle is kind of an overarching circle that is responsible for certain decisions. We have some legal documents that basically we did not alter that give, the tree circle responsibility for approving things like the budget, for any major changes to the infrastructure in buildings of tree and that kind of thing. The co-op board was not in the initial structure we were given, but it was well recognized that we had to integrate it because legally, under the state law, we were required to have a board of directors. And so we created a board of directors, which is linked to the administrative circle, but also has some very independent functions. That's why I put it in like that. It is responsible for our compliance with state law. It basically is responsible legally for all the decisions made in tree, but it can delegate most of them. So most of the decisions have been delegated to the work circles, things like approvals of transfer of shares and subleases, have to go through the co-op board, and there's a bunch of other, but we've also developed things they do with in conforming to law. Also, they're looking at our legal documents and considering, alterations in them to be more, to fit better with what we actually want to do. So, so the board of directors is just kind of put out there, but it's formally linked to the administrative circle, but has some really overarching powers. Okay, so each of the subcircles has additional subcircles. In addition to the more subcircles that are on here, there are subcircles of many of the subcircles. And then we have ad hoc subcircles, like when we want to pave our paths. We had a circle, subcircle of building and grounds that was devoted to path paving, and that we pave the path and that subcircle is gone. We periodically develop what we call helping circles. So the mission circle is in the major, wasn't recognized at the time we started, but we've activated it as a helping circle to the coordinating circle when we wanted to look at the mission and evaluate the mission. Our commitment is to evaluate the mission at least once a year. And we often have we sometimes have community conversations reviewing our mission and what people think about it, and kind of from that community conversation, we decide whether anything needs to be altered. Also, there may be a helping circle formed to make alterations or to periodically evaluate our mission and aims. Okay, so I just wanted to comment on that on the structure of tree. You can go back down a couple of slides to where we were. This is a presentation that one of our members did. That I'm just working off of. So this is basically talks about the overall goals of our sociocratic experiment, we call it. The actual dynamic governance was developed by an engineer as a form of as a refinement of sociocracy, and it was very well, so it has, very, very well organized, which I think is has worked great for us because it really gives us, it helps us be organized about it. One of the reasons we adapted sociocracy is we were dissatisfied with the consensus model because we had some experience with people just dropping in on meetings and kind of blocking decisions that they had no involvement in actual formulating, and had no understanding of the issues involved, except that it affected them negatively. And that.
Hey, Rob, I'd like to get to questions soon.
Okay,
so
great.
if you can wrap up in the next minute or so.
Okay,
that'd be
great. So anyway, so I just want to let you know that those were the basic things. Anyway, so I can wrap up. That's there's so much more that could be said, but I want to have room for questions. Oh, okay, the vision and aims. So this is our vision and mission, and that is a starting point for are developing goal, the other aspects of what we do. And each circle has its own domain and aims and objectives that we review each year. As a circle leader, I've been really impressed with how well it works. Our meetings are very efficiently run, seldom more than an hour and a half. People who drop in are very impressed with how much we get done in a short amount of time. And as am I. Okay, ready for questions?
Thanks,
And thoughts?
Rob and Willow. So we have about a half an hour left in our session. And this is open Q&A. So we invite those of you who are here to use the raise hand tool to ask a question. If you don't feel comfortable asking a question verbally, there is the chat option available to you. And the Q&A, the questions could be about sociocracy and governance in Ecovillage or anything else related to Ecovillage at Ithaca that we might answer for you. So if anyone has a question to get started, please. Yeah, Dean. And remember to unmute yourself too.
Thank you, guys. I have maybe like really short questions. My first question is, Willow, you said that there are three like key things as far as running the show for Sociocracy. You said trust in each other, working on a common purpose. I didn't hear the last one you said.
A willingness to compromise.
Okay. Thank you. I appreciate it. And I also have a question. There is what are like the is there a problem in terms of scaling these sort of communities? Like, do they work better with, at least as far as the processes you've encountered, with like 87 people, right, or something? Or is it better, like, can it scale to like 100,000 people? Is there a limitation?
Wow. Big. What do you think, Rob?
I'm not sure about 100,000 people. I mean, the engineer who developed actually dynamic governments, which was kind of the form of sociocracy that we were, designed it actually to work for both nonprofits and for corporations, and it was meant to work for larger organizations than ours. But I don't think it's meant to be an efficient way to well. There are aspects of it, anyway. The issue is, I mean, for instance, we have our meetings are open and anybody can attend. And when we do rounds, it's not just the core members of the group who get to speak. Everybody gets to speak. So if you have a meeting and 10,000 people decide to come and everybody gets to speak, it's kind of awkward. But often town halls are the same principle, where everybody comes in, in a local government and gets to speak. So in some sense, it can work. It can work in larger groups, and that's a parallel.
Right. Okay. Thank you. And
but we listen to every person who comes, even though they're not involved in the decision, and we respond to it.
Right.
Yeah.
Thank you. That's very helpful. And last question about the presentation itself. Actually, two questions. First, is there a way we could get a copy of the presentation, possibly?
So we will be making this video available on our YouTube channel. So that's one way that you could access it. It's up to Willow and Rob whether they want to share slides.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
The first part of the presentation, besides the last two slides and the tree circle hierarchy, besides those three slides, all of the other slides were put together from the book, Many Voices, One Song. And I would say that is your best resource, as well as the website itself. There's a lot of resources on the website. And so you will find everything in those slides. You will find either in that book or on their website. I'm fine with releasing the slides, although the last 2 slides are not my property. So if you want, maybe if you want to remove those, Caitlin.
Okay.
Awesome. And actually regarding the last 2 slides, and thank you, by the way, regarding the last 2 slides, I recognize the software that could be really useful. But I don't know the name. What's up?
Prezi.
Prezi. Amazing. Thank you. Thank you all, both of you. Appreciate it.
All right. The other thing that I thought might be useful to send, which is, public, is, we have our latest Sociocracy governance agreements. It's about 8 or 9 pages. And, has an attachment which includes our vision, mission, and overall aims that really describes Sociocracy here. And, also describes a lot of the principles of Sociocracy as we've implemented them. And, we could, I think Caitlin we could share that one too, if people are interested.
Yes, I'll send a follow-up email to all the participants with that information.
Thank
Are
you so
there
much.
other questions about governance or anything else to do with living in community? I see Janie.
Yes, thank you. I'm wondering if, without violating confidentiality of any processes that have happened there, if y'all could give an example of some recent issue where it's been, not necessarily a turnkey decision where everybody was able to immediately agree or come to consensus on it, and just kind of explain how that worked for a specific example. Thank you.
Rob,
Yeah.
are you okay talking about the affordability fund and what happened recently?
Yeah, if you can talk about it.
Sure.
I'm not feeling ready to.
Okay, sure.
We
We have a neighbor who was already living in Tree, who was downsizing and looking to move to another unit. And they needed some help financially. And we have a fund set up with money that was donated to specifically help people who can't necessarily get a mortgage together in the moment, but probably will be able to in the future. So there was a good sum of money set aside to help someone take a loan, which through the neighborhood, really. And what happened was that the policy, the agreement did not have the kind of specifics that made 1 or 2 of the shareholders comfortable with giving the loan. For example, the loan period was 5 years, and the thought was, okay, well, there's nothing. What happens if she can't pay it back at the end of the 5 years? What do we do? There's nothing there. Like, the policy was weak. And so that person had a valid objection, but because of the time frame that we were working in, they made an agreement that, let's say the Tree made an agreement that we will revisit this policy and make sure that it is stronger, get better guidelines in the future. And also we will change it from 5 years to 3 years. That made that person happy who brought up the objection. And then he gave the consent based on that was going to be revisited. So he did not hold up the process. He was able to compromise. We worked within his zone of tolerance, and that loan did go through.
Wonderful. Thank you so much.
Sure thing.
Who else has a question? I see Wendy, and sorry, I don't know who's with Wendy, but.
Okay, excuse me. Yeah, I'm with Wendy. I'm Mark. So thanks for having us on here today. Appreciate it. I'd be interested to learn about how the Tree neighborhood kind of cooperates, collaborates with the other neighborhoods and their governance models when it comes to things that impact the entire residential village.
Yeah, and I'll let the others jump in on that, but just so everyone has the context of our community. So Ecovillage at Ithaca has 3 neighborhoods, and each of those neighborhoods is its own legal and governance entity. And then in addition to that, we also have a village association that is a board that manages built infrastructure and property that is held in common that's not associated with one of those 3 neighborhoods. And then we also have EVI Inc., which is the land holding entity, and they make decisions to do with land that's not a part of those other 4 groups. So for example, we have 4 farms on our property. Those farms have a lease with EVI Inc. We have a road on our property that serves all 3 neighborhoods. That road is owned and managed, and decisions are made at the village association level. So those are a couple of just sort of structural pieces to how we're operating. But Willo or Rob, do you want to go further with that question?
I think you explained it fairly well, and that basically each neighborhood as a neighborhood is part of the village association, so that we attend village association meetings. Village association decisions are made by consensus, so it's different, but that's the way it is. But it seems to work out well because they're separate legal entities. They're incorporated, each is incorporated separately. EVI is incorporated as a nonprofit, and it owns, we have like 175 acres, and each neighborhood owns about 5 acres. And I think the village association owns maybe, the road and the parking and, another probably 5 or 10 acres, probably more like 10 acres of the land. And then the rest is owned by the nonprofit. It's a complicated structure. But
yeah, and sometimes it takes a little bit of work to figure out who owns a piece of property, or like what decision might fall under whose domain. But I don't know that each neighborhood necessarily works with each other all that often. It's really under the umbrella of the VA or EVI Inc. Unless, correct me if I'm wrong, Willo or Rob.
Yeah, it's correct. We do have some work with the village association around around parking and that kind of issue, and they actually own the carports, and stuff like that, which there requires some negotiation.
Land partnership works closely together, all of the neighborhoods through land partnership, and that is taking care of the land that is not specific to the neighborhoods. Is that correct?
Yes, that's a good point. We do have certain groups or committees that might be doing work. And again, in our community, almost everything is happening through volunteer work. There's an expectation that community members are giving 2 to 4 hours a week in service in some form or another. So that might be on a circle in governance, or it could be maintaining land or buildings, cook team, dish crew. There are lots of different ways people contribute. So land partnership is an example of a group or a circle where people are volunteering and working at a level that does affect all neighborhoods and the whole community. That's not really about the factioning of each neighborhood.
Thank you very much. Very much appreciated.
Sure.
Okay.
I see a question in the chat from Lynn about mold and mildew. So in the past, we've mentioned problems with mold and mildew in some of our buildings. And the question is whether that's village-wide or only affecting a few neighborhoods or a few households. I actually don't have a lot of the history there, so I will lean on others to help answer this, but it seems to be specific to certain building types or building construction and siting situations. So for example, I live in the first neighborhood, and we have duplexes and quadrants, and the houses are built on crawl spaces. And so they're because of some of the construction methods that were used, vapor barriers weren't properly installed in some cases. So there was some mold and mildew issues in households because of the damp crawl spaces.
Uh-oh, we lost her.
Years ago. Our neighborhoods are cooperatives. In New York State, cooperatives are a pretty common structure. And so the cooperatives own the exterior of the buildings and maintain the exterior of the households. So there was a kind of extensive project of having to take siding off the buildings, redoing vapor barriers and things like that. And that seems to have corrected the issue for most people in that neighborhood. And it did not affect every home. I think I would let Willo or Rob speak to Tree, because the Tree neighborhood was built as passive house, which is a German, originally a German design system of very, very tight building envelopes. They're highly energy efficient, but it does mean you have to have certain systems of ventilation and know how to operate the building, because very tight buildings like that can sometimes have mold and mildew issues as well. I don't know. I mean, Lynn, sorry, Lynn was asking the question. Willo and Rob, I don't know if you have experience with that, given the housing type that you live in, but please, yeah.
Yeah, we haven't had extensive problems with mildew and mold. There are individual households that have had problems. For instance, some people, and some of it's related to not running, not using the ventilation properly, because part of preventing mildew and mold in a very tight house is having some air circulation. And if moisture gets into your ductwork and stuff like that, it can encourage the growth of mildew and mold. And if you don't run your ventilation system and just use your windows, that can encourage mildew and mold. We've also had extensive insect infestations in systems that people don't run, because moving air just, tends to keep the insects out. And then when they turn their air thing on, they get huge piles of insect exoskeletons in their ventilation system. And in one case, it caused a breakdown, and we had to replace a ventilator because of it. So there are issues like that. These we're finding lots of issues with the really super tight houses. Our heating bills are incredibly low, but there are other issues with CO2 and other things that we're spending energy kind of learning about, which aren't common to people with so-called normal houses. Anyway, but that's if people have more questions about that, I'd be glad to answer.
Yeah, Lynn, I hope that answered it. Yeah, right. I hope that answered it, Lynn, but feel free to follow up with any further questions there. I see you're listed as observer. You have your hand up.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, great. Thank you for presenting, by the way. That was really informative and useful just for me to think about. I was like, wow, this is pretty complicated. Makes a lot of sense. I feel like it needs to be complicated in order to be efficient. So yeah, very enlightening. I had two questions. I also need to hop pretty soon, so I guess I'll catch the recording if I need to. But the first one was more about, how do you intake feedback on the process and make changes, like the process itself? And the second one was around more about the village as a whole, and like the process of people, like what kind of people basically fit, in your opinion, are the most successful? Yeah.
In our Ecovillage community?
Yes.
Okay. Well, I'll let the others answer the process question first.
Yeah, I'll chime in on the process, and Rob, you can add to it if you like. The process, how do we deal with feedback? It's through the rounds. The reason the rounds are so effective and something that I would not skip is because in rounds, a person speaks and everybody else listens intently. Like you get my 100% attention. And I'm listening because it's important to me and it's important to, the group. And so the rounds are where you're going to get feedback, and you're not going to really react to a person's feedback necessarily and say, now that's not a very good idea. It's a very respectful environment when you're doing the rounds. And so everybody gets that voice, and you don't have people talking over each other, which is amazing, right? Normally committee work, you've got people you got 3 conversations going. That doesn't happen in our meetings.
I'll add, SOFA, when they have a lot of free classes and workshops and some paid, some free, and they have a lot of resources. I remember attending one once where I forget if I think it was Ted was saying one of the most important things to them is the checkout round. And so, a lot of meetings will have check-in rounds, and then the check-in out round sometimes gets skipped over, people forget to do it, or it gets short shrift. But one of the values that Sociocracy places on the checkout round is an opportunity to speak about the process. And so it's not just checking out on your personal level, but how did the meeting go for you? That kind of thing is also incorporated in the process.
Yeah, I have a couple of things to say. One is about rounds. The way rounds seem to work in my experience is that one person will speak and give a perspective, and often people down the line will each add their perspective and try to incorporate the first person's perspective into a broader perspective. And then maybe add to that, and then the next person will incorporate the couple of people before them and add to that perspective till we get a much richer proposal or a much richer idea of what we want to do. I mean, I found in rounds the incredible experience that way, that I've seen it happen many times, and it's why one of the reasons why I love rounds. The checkout round, we each make a comment on our relationships, the process of the meeting and the content of the meeting. And it's, when I facilitate a meeting, it's often very helpful feedback, like you got lost in the weeds over there, about this. And, it makes me aware of what, some of the things, how to do a meeting better next time. So, and secondly, evaluation. There's an overall evaluation of our process, towards the end of the agreed upon period of implementation. And if we send out the Sociocratic Governance Agreement, there's specific criteria for that evaluation, and that we use both interviews. In the past, we've used interviews and surveys to really, as well as what we call community conversations, to assess where whether we met these criteria, and if anything else that people may want to add. But we have specific evaluation criteria to make sure that we're doing what we say we want to do.
And then when it comes to determining if people are a good fit for the community, it's quite self-selecting in our case. So if you go to the Ecovillage at Ithaca website, we have a Living Here page, and that describes our membership process. And so, and that's unlike other communities. There are some communities that sort of vote on people or that sort of thing. We don't do that here. So the membership process in our case is really intended to help people experience what life is like here and determine for themselves if it would be a good fit. So we're not sort of judging people, it's self-selecting, and that does mean sometimes people move here and determine it's not the best fit for them and will move on. That does happen from time to time. I don't know if anyone else had something to add on that question.
Sure. It would be, I think it would behoove anyone considering living in any eco-village or co-housing or intentional community to investigate the mission of that community and the values and the principles.
Right.
Yeah.
And the other thing, that came to mind for me was in terms of, people who are best fit, we've had some people leave, and often the issue is that they really want more control of their environment personally. So, if you're the type of person who says, okay, my house has to be, these issues in my neighborhood have to be dealt with in a certain way, or the walkway to my house has to be a certain way, and, and you're not willing to say, oh, well, that's not the community decision, and you're not willing, you're not open to just saying, okay, I'm willing to accept the community decision. And my feeling is that I like making decisions with lots of input because I think we get better decisions. And even though sometimes I may have preferred the decision go a different way, I'm committed to following the decision as it's made by my community. So, but not everybody, is built that way.
So we have time for one last question. Yeah, I see Dean. Oh, you're muted, Dean.
You're muted, Dean.
Awesome. Okay, thanks. So I was actually curious, do you guys have like any open like working and living positions where in your community right now? If someone wanted to go?
So it's always something to check back in on because it's ever changing. So we I don't believe we currently have any open rentals or sales, but we're a co-housing community, so we have individual households, and occasionally there are some rentals, but mostly things are for sale, like ownership models. So those are listed in our rentals and sales section.
Oops, you're frozen.
We're a residential community, so we don't have jobs that are situated here in our community. Other communities are different. Some communities have farms or businesses or, like tourism businesses, and that's not our situation here. So people who live here have jobs, in the community or remote work or work for themselves, have their own businesses. So that's our setup here.
Right. Okay. Do you perchance know of any communities that do that?
Gosh, there are a lot of them. I won't name specific ones, but I think a good place to start would be the Foundation for Intentional Community directory. So that's the most comprehensive directory of international wide directory of intentional community, and you can do an advanced search that really narrows down what you're looking for. And then of course there's the Global Ecovillage Network, which is another network that you could search. Because yes, there are quite a few of them, but I couldn't speak specifically to, who has openings or kind of how they bring people in.
Thank you. Yeah.
So I'm gonna end there. I just have a quick closing slide for you all. So we have a few things coming up. So like I mentioned, we are going to take a 2-month break for these Q&As. So the next one will be in September. And we will be talking about mindfulness in community. But we also have in August, we are hosting our an experience weekend. And so that will be a weekend intensive in person where people can come to Ecovillage, and it's a curated experience where we offer different kinds of programs and tours and things to help people understand what it might be like to live in our community or in community in general. And then this is contact information for us. So we do have occasional newsletter emails that go out. We also have social media. So if you want to stay in touch with our offerings, those are good ways of doing that. And we're always looking for people who want to get involved with our particular mission, which is, spreading the word about eco-villages and co-housing and how they're a great model for living. So that is our session for today. And I also welcome, if people think of other questions or things come up for you, you're welcome to email us with follow-up questions. And we will send an email in the next day or two with a feedback survey and those couple of resources that Rob mentioned about how sociocracy works in our community. So thanks for your time, everyone.
Thank you.
Great.